I was 15 when my mom left, and my dad told me it was my fault, not in anger, in cold, calculating certainty. That moment is carved into my memory like a scar. I remember it more clearly than my first kiss, more vividly than the day. I graduated high school. My mom had just walked out the front door. No dramatic shouting, no slammed doors, no suitcases tumbling down the stairs, just silence. She looked exhausted. Not physically, but in the kind of way that told you her soul had been grinding down over years, not days. And as the door clicked, shut behind her, my dad turned to me with those flat, emotionless eyes and said, "She couldn't take it anymore, Tyler. You pushed her too far. She was tired of dealing with you." At 15, you're too young to understand what emotional manipulation really is. You think your parents are always right, especially when they speak with certainty. So I believed him. I believed I was the reason my mom left. I spent nights staring at my ceiling, replaying conversations, wondering if I had been too difficult, too selfish, too me. Every memory became a crime scene, every argument a nail in the coffin of their marriage. Guilt wrapped itself around me like barbed wire. I started shrinking, my voice, my presence, my personality. I tried to become easier to love, quieter, smaller. My dad didn't miss my mom in the way I did. He moved on quickly, almost mechanically. Within a year, he met Claudia. She was nothing like my mother. Where my mom had been patient and grounded, Claudia was a whirlwind of smiles, perfume, and wine. She was younger, always impeccably dressed, with a laugh that felt a little too loud, a little too forced. From the start, I could tell she craved attention, not just my dad's, but anyone's, including mine. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Claudia would lean in too close when she talked to me, brushing her fingers against my arm for just a second too long. She'd compliment me in strange ways, saying things like, "You've got your dad's jawline, but yours is stronger," or, "If I were just a few years younger." It made me deeply uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to bring it up without sounding paranoid or arrogant. Still, I eventually got the courage to tell my dad. I waited until he was in a decent mood, which was rare. I kept it simple. "I think Claudia flirts with me. It makes me uncomfortable." He didn't even look up from his laptop. He just scoffed and said, "Don't flatter yourself." That was the moment something inside me fractured. Not from pain, but from clarity. My father didn't believe me. He didn't want to believe me. And suddenly, a lot of things made sense. He hadn't believed my mom either, not when she'd told him she was lonely or that his coldness was breaking her down. He didn't just dismiss emotions, he rewrote them. If something didn't fit his worldview, he simply erased it and wrote a new one where he was the victim. It was then I realized I had been cast as the villain in a story he wrote to protect himself from guilt. But if I was already the villain, why not play the part? I didn't turn into some twisted monster overnight. I didn't want revenge, not at first. I wanted peace. I wanted space to breathe without constantly feeling like I was being blamed for the emotional failings of adults who refused to take responsibility. But that wasn't going to happen in a house where my father's word was gospel. So I started watching, listening, studying both of them, my dad and Claudia, like a chessboard. Every move, every weakness, every habit. Claudia was the kind of person who needed constant validation, compliments, flirtation, emotional stimulation. She was easy to steer because she wanted to be seen. My dad, on the other hand, wanted control over the narrative, over the household, over how others viewed him. He needed things to look perfect, even if they were rotting from the inside. So, I became someone they both could trust, but for very different reasons. With Claudia, I played the charming, understanding stepson. I told her she looked nice when she dressed up, that I appreciated how she tried to make our home lively. I didn't push boundaries, I just gave her space to imagine me differently. With my dad, I became the model son again, polite, obedient, apologetic. He had no reason to suspect anything was changing. He thought I was finally maturing. But what I was really doing was planting seeds. I'd casually mention how Claudia seemed a little distant lately, or how she was always texting someone when he wasn't around. I'd compliment her cooking and say, She always seems happiest when you're not home. I'd leave things unsaid, just enough for his insecurities to do the rest of the work. It was terrifying how easy it was to twist him. Paranoia came, naturally to my dad because it was rooted in control. The moment he felt like something was slipping through his fingers, he would spiral. And spiral he did. He started coming home earlier, checking Claudia's phone when she left it unattended, watching her like a hawk. And the more he hovered, the more distant she became. Exactly what I wanted. One night, I left a glass on the table with a smudge of lipstick on it. Claudia had been drinking wine earlier, and I borrowed the glass while she was in the shower. I left it out deliberately. My dad noticed. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Not to me, anyway. 2 days later, he exploded at Claudia over a missed call and accused her of hiding something. She cried. He yelled. I watched silently from the hallway, heart pounding, face calm. Then I upped the ante. I sent a text to Claudia, playfully worded, ambiguous and just suggestive enough. I made sure my dad saw it when I left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. I even smiled when he glanced at it. A simple, meant for someone else, was all I said when he asked about it. But the yawing damage was done. The idea had taken root, and now he couldn't stop obsessing. What followed was weeks of tension. Claudia grew more guarded, more frustrated. My dad grew more accusatory, more bitter. Their once practiced smiles disappeared completely. He stopped trusting her. She stopped trying. And me? I played the role of the innocent bystander, quietly doing my homework, helping set the table, nodding sympathetically when either of them vented to me. The final crack came on a Thursday night. I came home from school to find the house in chaos. Claudia had packed a suitcase and was wheeling it toward the door. My dad stood in the hallway, red-faced, shouting things I'd never heard from him before. Nasty, desperate things. Claudia didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked tired, like my mom had years ago. She paused at the door, looked at me and said softly, "You always deserved better than this." Then she left. My dad didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, breathing heavy. I walked into the kitchen, pulled out a glass of water, and waited. 10 minutes later, he followed me in. She said, his voice cracked. "She said you told her I was controlling." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just met his eyes and said, "I learned from the best." He didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe, just maybe, for the first time. In his life, he realized what it felt like to be disbelieved, manipulated, alone. As I went back to my room, I didn't feel a rush of victory. No thrill, no fireworks, just peace. I didn't destroy my father's second marriage out of spite. I simply held up a mirror. And this time, he couldn't look away. He blamed me for his failures, for Mom's pain, for the collapse of a family. I had no power to hold together. So I gave him exactly what he gave me. Silence, distance, and a reality he couldn't control. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. They say karma always comes around, but karma's slow, cold, impersonal. What I gave my father wasn't karma, it was deliberate, human, surgical, and I thought that would be enough. But damage doesn't end just because you stopped swinging. The hammer. After Claudia left, things in the house changed. Quieter, yes, but not peaceful. It was a brittle silence, the kind that feels like it could shatter if you breathe wrong. My dad didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't speak much at all. He just sat. A man surrounded by the wreckage of his own control, unable to figure out how it all slipped through his fingers. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. But I didn't. I felt unfinished. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was searching for understanding, for a truth I'd never gotten, an apology, or at least an acknowledgement that I hadn't destroyed anything, that he had, that I'd been a victim all along, but that never came. Days turned to weeks, and he never once asked me what really happened. He just drifted through life, wounded, sulking in self-pity, as if he had been wronged by the world. And then he met Rachel. She was different from Claudia, more mature, softer in the way she spoke and moved. She worked in real estate and had a sharp, confident aura that made it hard not to respect her. And yet, there was something else. Something about the way she watched me across the dinner table, calculating, quietly studying. I knew that look. I wore that look. I was 18 by then, legally an adult, though still stuck in that house until I finished college. I could have walked away. But I didn't. Not yet. Something about Rachel kept me hooked. She wasn't like Claudia, no obvious flirtation, no seductive boundary crossing. She was careful, reserved. At first. But soon I realized something. She wasn't interested in me the way Claudia had been. She was interested in him, in fixing him. My dad had mastered playing the victim. He probably told her all the same stories he told me, that Mom was cold, that Claudia was unstable, that I was difficult. I imagine he painted himself as the poor, lonely man trying to rebuild after 2 betrayals. He wore shame like a tailored suit, just enough to seem human, but not enough to admit fault. And Rachel bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. I'd catch her watching me when my dad wasn't around. Her eyes sharp, her smile too polite. It was clear she didn't trust me, and not because of anything I'd done, because of what he had told her. I tried to stay uninvolved. I really did. I wanted to be better. But the way she treated me, with that subtle suspicion, that undercurrent of judgment, told me she had already picked a side. And I wasn't on it. The worst part? She started trying to parent me, not in an overt way, but in a slow, psychological erosion. Passive-aggressive, notes on the fridge. Don't forget to clean the bathroom. You're a man now. Or, your dad has been through a lot. Try to make his life easier. Always wrapped in fake concern. Always with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And my dad? He encouraged it. Of course he did. He loved having someone in his corner again. He thrived on being the misunderstood one. I was no longer his son. I was the live-in reminder of his past failures. That's when I realized. I wasn't free. I had escaped one. Trap only to be caught in another. A new dynamic, same story. I was still the villain in his version of events. And Rachel was just the next believer. So I decided to rewrite the narrative, permanently. This time, I didn't want to blow it up. I wanted to rot it from the inside, slowly, quietly, just like he'd done to my mom, just like he'd done to me. Rachel prided herself on being intuitive, emotionally intelligent, so I played into that. I let her believe she had figured me out. I was emotionally stunted, afraid of connection, acting out from abandonment issues. I let her psychoanalyze me over dinner, giving her just enough resistance to make her feel smart when she broke through. And then I started slipping in moments of vulnerability. I don't know why I keep pushing people away, I'd say, my eyes downcast. I guess I'm just afraid to trust, I'd admit, with a hollow laugh. She softened. Slowly. Predictably. She started offering more guidance, more unsolicited life advice. And I listened. I nodded. I thanked her. I played the part of the troubled young man desperate for a maternal figure. And once she thought I needed her, I began the unraveling. It started with small things. I told her how my dad would sometimes talk to my mom when he thought no one was around, how he seemed lost in the past. Then I started mentioning how he had compared her to Claudia, how he said Rachel was a little colder, a little tougher to impress. I never said it with malice, always with hesitation, like it pained me to say it. She started noticing things on her own. My dad forgetting to respond to her texts, coming home late, falling asleep on the couch instead of beside her. All normal. Things, but now seen through a warped lens. She began doubting herself, asking subtle questions. Did your dad say anything about me today? Has he seemed distant to you? I became her confidant. Then came the final piece. I left my laptop open one evening while I went to shower. On the screen, an old chat thread with a friend, carefully edited to suggest an affair. The name was obscured, the conversation vague. Just enough to imply my dad was speaking to someone behind Rachel's back. She saw it. I made sure of it. I found her in the kitchen that night, pale, wine glass trembling in her hand. She asked me, "Is there something going on I should know?" "About?" I looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You always seem so sure of yourself." I didn't want to be the one to break that. She cried. Not loudly. Just one long, breathless sob. And my dad? He walked into the kitchen moments later, greeted by the aftermath of a bomb he didn't know had been dropped. He looked at me like he knew I had something to do with it, but couldn't prove it, couldn't stop it. They fought for days. Whispers behind closed doors. Passive-aggressive dinners. Rachel grew colder, angrier. My dad tried to explain things he hadn't done, exactly. Like I had once, and she didn't believe him. Because I'd already rewritten her version of him, I stayed quiet, and then she left. Just like the others. Only this time, she didn't look at me with sadness or pity. She looked at me with fear, as if, in her last moment, she finally understood. And my dad. He stood in the same spot in the hallway where my mom had once disappeared, where Claudia had dragged her suitcase, where Rachel now lingered for one last breath. And for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not confusion. Not anger, but recognition. He knew. He didn't say it. He wouldn't. But he knew. I was the common denominator now. He couldn't blame it on them anymore. And I didn't need to say a word. After Rachel, my dad never dated again. He became a ghost. In his own house. The once proud, commanding figure now reduced to quiet TV dinners and long walks that ended nowhere. We barely spoke. Not out of hostility, but exhaustion. What more was there to say? I moved out a year later. Got my own place. Cut off contact. No dramatic goodbye. Just a final note on the kitchen table. You made me believe I was the problem. I made sure you finally understood what that feels like. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Now, years later, people ask me why I don't talk about my family. I tell them I'm an only child of divorced parents. That's all. I don't tell them about the manipulation, the gaslighting, the slow, deliberate revenge. I don't tell them how I became what he made me, then used it to destroy the version of himself he cherished most, the victim. Do I regret it? No. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the outside. Sometimes it's handed to you in the form of pain, and you choose what to do with it. I didn't just break the cycle, I ended it.